The morning sun hadn't yet peeked through the tall buildings of downtown Los Angeles when Maria Rodriguez carefully folded their thin blanket, trying not to wake her sleeping 6-year-old daughter, Sophia. The little girl curled up tighter, clutching her worn teddy bear, the last birthday gift from her father before everything changed. Maria's eyes softened as she watched her daughter sleep. Sophia looked so peaceful despite their harsh reality. The cardboard box they used as a windbreak was damp from the morning dew, and Maria knew she needed to start her day soon if they wanted to eat breakfast. This particular corner had become their spot over the past few months. It was near a busy intersection where expensive cars would stop at the red light, giving Maria just enough time to catch someone's attention with her songs. The local coffee shop owner, Mr. Lee, would sometimes sneak them day-old pastries and hot chocolate for Sophia. He never said much, just gave them a kind smile and a gentle nod. Maria pulled out her most precious possession from their small backpack, a carefully wrapped photo of her family from happier times. In it, she stood proudly in front of her music classroom in Mexico, her husband's arm around her shoulder and little Sophia, then 4, beaming at the camera. That was before the accident, before the medical bills, before they lost everything. The early morning traffic was starting to pick up. Maria could hear the familiar rumble of delivery trucks and see office workers hurrying past with their coffee cups. She gently woke Sophia, who rubbed her eyes and gave her mother a sleepy smile. "Mama, will you sing the butterfly song today?" Sophia asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. It was their special morning routine. Maria would sing La Mariposa, a gentle song about a butterfly finding its way home, while Sophia ate whatever breakfast they could manage. Maria set up their small space with practiced care. She placed Sophia's blanket in a clean, dry spot behind the concrete pillar where her daughter could watch her sing, while staying safe from the busy street. Their few belongings, a backpack with changes of clothes, Sophia's school books, Maria insisted she keep up with her studies, and a small bag of toiletries were neatly arranged nearby. As the morning crowd began to build, Maria cleared her throat and began to sing. Her voice, clear and strong, carried over the traffic noise. She didn't use a sign asking for money like others did. Instead, she let her music tell their story. She sang traditional Spanish ballads that spoke of love, loss, and hope, songs her grandmother had taught her, songs she had once taught her own students. People began to notice. A businessman paused his phone call for a moment, his expression softening as he listened. A young mother pushing a stroller slowed down, her own child mesmerized by the melody. Some dropped coins or small bills into the paper cup at Maria's feet, while others hurried past, too caught up in their own morning rush to notice. Sophia watched it all from her spot, doing her math problems in a notebook Mr. Lee had given her. She was good with numbers, just like her father had been. Sometimes she would count the coins they collected, practicing her addition while helping her mother plan their meals. The February wind picked up, making Maria pull her thin jacket tighter around herself. The weather forecast had predicted rain later, and she worried about keeping Sophia dry. They had learned the hard ways of street life, which doorways offered the best shelter, which public bathrooms were safe to use, which library security guards would let Sophia stay a little longer on cold days. But through it all, Maria kept singing. Her voice never wavered, even when her stomach growled or her feet ached. She sang for Sophia, for their survival, for the dream of something better. She sang because it was the one piece of her old life she could hold on to, the one skill that could still open doors in this foreign city. And so the morning continued, a stream of luxury cars passing by their corner, Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. Maria didn't know it yet, but one of those cars would soon change everything. For now, she just sang, her voice carrying hope into the cool morning air, while Sophia worked on her math problems and dreamed of butterflies finding their way home. James Chen drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his Mercedes-Benz S-Class, fighting the urge to check his watch again. The morning traffic in downtown Los Angeles moved at a snail's pace, and he was already running late for an important meeting with a rising pop star's management team. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that morning, another message from his assistant about the meeting. James sighed, running his hand through his slightly graying hair. 20 years in the music industry had taught him that sometimes the best talents weren't found in fancy recording studios or trendy clubs, but he hadn't discovered anyone truly special in years. The radio played softly in the background, some overproduced pop song that was currently topping the charts. James reached to turn it off when something else caught his ear. A voice floating through his closed car windows, rising above the street noise and morning chaos. He lowered his window slightly, trying to locate the source of the sound. The voice was singing what seemed to be a traditional Spanish ballad, but it was the raw emotion in the performance that made him pause his phone call mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he said quickly, ending the call despite his assistant's protests. The voice belonged to a woman standing on the corner ahead. She wasn't using any microphone or instruments, just her pure, natural voice carrying across the morning air. James found himself completely still, listening to the way she shaped each note with such genuine feeling. In all his years of producing music, he'd heard countless technically perfect voices, but this was different. This voice had soul. Through his windshield, he could see her more clearly now. She wasn't performing for attention. Her eyes were closed as she sang, lost in the music. Her clothes were worn, and behind her, a young girl sat on a blanket, working in what looked like a school notebook. The scene struck something deep in James's heart, reminding him of his own childhood when his mother would sing while doing household chores, her voice making their small apartment feel like a palace. The traffic light turned green, and horns blared behind him. James checked his mirrors and carefully pulled his car over to the curb, something he'd never done in this part of town. His assistant would be furious. He was now definitely going to be late for the meeting. But 20 years of instinct told him this was more important. As he stepped out of his car, the morning chill hit him through his expensive suit. The woman's voice grew stronger. She was singing what he recognized as La Llorona, a Mexican folk song he'd heard his grandmother sing many years ago. The emotion in her voice made the hair on his arms stand up. This wasn't just singing. This was storytelling through music. Several other pedestrians had stopped too, forming a small crowd. A young couple held hands, swaying slightly to the melody. An elderly man wiped his eyes discreetly. Even the usually hurried office workers had slowed their pace, some dropping bills into the paper cup at the woman's feet. The little girl looked up from her notebook, watching the growing crowd with a mixture of pride and protective concern for her mother. She noticed James standing there in his business suit and gave him a small, cautious wave. There was something dignified about her, sitting there with her schoolwork while her mother sang. James pulled out his phone again, this time to record a short video of the performance. In an industry increasingly dominated by auto-tune and artificial effects, this was what real music sounded like, pure, honest, and straight from the heart. He knew his colleagues would call him crazy for being late to a meeting over a street performer, but he'd learned to trust his instincts. The song came to an end, and the small crowd dispersed, dropping more bills into the cup as they left. The woman opened her eyes, and for a moment she seemed surprised to see anyone still standing there. She gave a small, graceful bow to the remaining onlookers, her dignity evident despite her circumstances. James took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and stepped forward. In his mind, he could already hear what this voice could do with the right support and opportunity. But more than that, he wanted to know the story behind the song, to understand what had brought such talent to this street corner on a chilly Los Angeles morning. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change not only his day, but the lives of everyone involved. Sometimes the best notes in life's song come from the most unexpected places, played at just the right moment, when someone takes the time to stop and really listen. The morning sun had finally broken through the city's tall buildings when James approached Maria. She was still catching her breath from singing La Llorona, her eyes carrying the lingering emotion of the song. Little Sophia had already moved closer to her mother, a protective instinct they'd developed during their months on the street. James noticed how Sophia clutched her mother's worn coat, her small notebook still open to math problems on her lap. He'd seen this protective dance before, in his own childhood, when strangers would approach his mother at their family's small grocery store. He deliberately kept his distance, not wanting to frighten them. "That was beautiful," he said softly in Spanish, his grandmother's lessons from years ago coming back to him. "I haven't heard La Llorona sung like that since I was a child." The surprise on Maria's face at hearing her native language made her shoulders relax slightly. Maria nodded politely, but her eyes remained cautious. Living on the streets had taught her that kindness sometimes came with hidden costs. "Thank you," she replied in careful English, her hand gently resting on Sophia's shoulder. "My grandmother taught me this song when I was her age." She nodded toward Sophia, who was studying James with curious eyes. The morning traffic continued its steady hum around them, but on their corner, time seemed to slow down. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from the nearby bakery, making Sophia's stomach growl quietly. James pretended not to notice, but reached into his briefcase and pulled out an unopened packet of crackers he'd saved from his last flight. "Would you mind if I sat and listened to another song?" he asked, offering the crackers to Sophia with a gentle smile. "I was supposed to be in a meeting about finding new musical talent, but I think fate had other plans today." He gestured to a clean spot on the concrete near them, waiting for their permission. Maria hesitated, then nodded slowly. Sophia carefully opened the crackers, sharing the first one with her mother before taking one herself. It was a small gesture that spoke volumes about their relationship. James sat down, not caring about his expensive suit touching the sidewalk. As Maria began to sing again, this time a gentler melody about butterflies that made Sophia smile, James closed his eyes and really listened. Her voice had something that no amount of studio production could create: authenticity. Every note carried the weight of her experiences, her struggles, her love for her daughter. The morning crowd continued to flow around them, some people stopping to listen, others rushing past with their coffee cups and smartphones. A young street artist working nearby stopped spray painting to listen, his half-finished mural forgotten for a moment. Even the usually grumpy hot dog vendor on the corner stood still, spatula suspended in mid-air. Between songs, James learned bits of their story. He didn't press for details, but Maria slowly shared small pieces: how she used to teach music to children in Mexico, how Sophia loved mathematics just like her father had, how they'd ended up here through a series of unfortunate events that could happen to anyone. Sophia, growing more comfortable, showed James her notebook filled with multiplication tables and practice problems. "Mama helps me study every day," she explained proudly. "She says education is something nobody can take away from you." The wisdom in those young eyes struck James deeply. A delivery worker who passed by regularly left them his extra breakfast sandwich, a kindness he did most mornings. James watched as Maria carefully split it into 2 portions, wrapping half in a napkin for Sophia's lunch later. These small acts of dignity and motherly love moved him more than any expensive charity gala he'd ever attended. The sun was higher now, and James's phone had been buzzing continuously. But he stayed, watching how people responded to Maria's voice, how her music created moments of genuine human connection in the midst of the busy city. An elderly woman stopped to share memories of her own mother singing these songs. A group of construction workers on their break requested a song they remembered from their childhood. What struck James most wasn't just Maria's talent, though that was remarkable, but the way her music created a small community on this anonymous city corner. People who would normally rush past without a glance found themselves pausing, sharing smiles, remembering their own stories. In a city known for its isolation and disconnection, Maria's voice was building bridges. Looking at his watch finally, James knew he needed to make a decision. His meetings could be rescheduled, but opportunities like this, moments of genuine human connection and raw talent, were rare. Sometimes the most important melodies in life come not from pristine recording studios, but from street corners where real stories are being sung with real heart. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small coffee shop where James had invited Maria and Sophia to warm up and share their story. Mr. Lee, the shop owner who had been quietly helping them for months, smiled knowingly as he brought over hot chocolate for Sophia and coffee for the adults. The warmth of the cups seemed to thaw more than just cold hands. "I wasn't always here on the street," Maria began softly, watching Sophia draw on a napkin with a pen Mr. Lee had given her. "Back home in Mexico, I taught music at a small school in our town. The children there—" Her voice trailed off, and she smiled at a memory. "They were like little birds, always eager to sing." The coffee shop's quiet buzz provided a gentle backdrop as Maria's story unfolded. She told James about her classroom, where old guitars hung on the walls, and how she would teach the children traditional songs to help them remember their heritage. Her husband, Roberto, had been the town's most respected math teacher, and together they had built a simple but happy life. Sofia gets her love for numbers from her father, Maria said, gently touching her daughter's head. Sofia looked up briefly from her drawing of musical notes and numbers intertwined. He could make mathematics dance like music. James listened intently as Maria described the series of events that had brought them here. It had started with Roberto's sudden illness, a devastating diagnosis that had required expensive treatments. "We sold everything," she explained, turning her coffee cup slowly in her hands. "The car, our small house, my guitar, everything except Sofia's teddy bear." The medical bills had piled up despite their best efforts. After Roberto passed away, Maria had tried to keep teaching, but the school had to cut programs due to budget constraints. The music program was the first to go. "It's funny," she said, without humor, "how quickly a normal life can slip away." They had come to Los Angeles with hope and a small savings, chasing rumors of better opportunities. But the city had proven harder to navigate than expected. Their savings had dwindled quickly, and promised jobs had fallen through. Soon, they found themselves joining the invisible population of the city's streets. "The hardest part," Maria confided, her voice barely above a whisper, "isn't the cold or the hunger. It's watching Sofia try to be so brave." She glanced at her daughter, who was now helping Mr. Lee arrange clean cups behind the counter, chatting with him in a mix of English and Spanish. James noticed how Sofia had developed a quiet strength beyond her years. She moved with the careful awareness of a child who had learned to navigate two worlds, the harsh reality of their current situation and the gentle innocence of her age. When Mr. Lee showed her how to make a paper crane from a napkin, her delighted laugh reminded everyone that she was still very much a child. "But we never stopped singing," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. "Even on the hardest days, we would sing together. Sofia knows all the old songs now." She smiled as Sofia hummed while folding another paper crane. "Music. It keeps our spirits alive. It reminds us of who we are, where we come from." The afternoon light shifted, painting the coffee shop walls in warm oranges and reds. Mr. Lee brought over a plate of pastries that would just go to waste anyway, he insisted with a gentle smile. James watched as Maria thanked him with the same dignity she showed in everything. No desperate grabbing, just graceful acceptance of kindness offered. Some days, Maria said, breaking a pastry to share with Sofia, "I stand on that corner singing, and it feels like I'm back in my classroom. The way people stop to listen, how they share their own stories. It reminds me that music connects us all, no matter where we are." James thought about all the manufactured music he dealt with daily, the auto-tuned perfection, the focus-grouped lyrics, the calculated images. Here was something real, something that spoke to the heart of why music mattered in the first place. Sofia returned to their table with another paper crane, this one made from a receipt she'd found. "Mr. Lee says we can come back tomorrow," she announced proudly. "He says I'm good at organizing the sugar packets." The simple joy in her voice spoke volumes about how much normal interactions meant to a child living on the streets. As the afternoon drew to a close, James realized he'd heard more than just a story of hardship. He'd witnessed a testament to human resilience, to the power of a mother's love, and to the way music could sustain the spirit through the darkest times. In Maria's voice, he had found not just talent, but a reminder of music's true purpose: to connect, to heal, to tell the stories that needed to be heard. The evening sky had turned a deep purple when James finally shared his thoughts. They were still in Mr. Lee's coffee shop, which should have closed an hour ago, but he had simply dimmed the lights and continued wiping the sand counter, pretending not to listen. "I want you to come to my studio," James said carefully, watching Maria's expression, "not just to audition. I've heard enough to know what you can do. I want to record your voice, your stories, these songs that mean so much." He pulled out his business card, placing it gently on the table between them. Maria stared at the card, her hands wrapped around her now-cold coffee cup. The golden letters caught the light. James Chen, executive producer, Harmony Records. Sofia leaned over to read it too, sounding out the words carefully in English. I don't understand," Maria said softly. "Why would you want to record these old songs? They're just simple melodies from home." Her fingers traced the edge of the business card, but she didn't pick it up. James leaned forward, his voice earnest. Because they're real. Because when you sing them, people stop and listen. Today, I watched a businessman cry listening to your voice. I saw a teenager take off his headphones to hear you better. Do you know how rare that is? Sophia had pulled out her notebook again, drawing musical notes alongside her math problems. She hummed quietly, a melody her father used to sing when helping her with homework. Maria watched her daughter, thinking about all the promises she'd made to give her a better life. But we have no papers, no proper documents, Maria whispered, her greatest fear finally spoken aloud. And where would Sophia stay while I record? We can't. Her voice trailed off as the enormity of their situation weighed on her. James had anticipated this. My wife is an immigration lawyer, he explained, pulling out his phone to show them a family photo. She helps people regularize their status, especially artists and performers. And as for Sophia, he smiled at the little girl. Our studio has a learning center for employees' children. She could study there while you work. Mr. Lee appeared with fresh tea for everyone, as if they were just starting their evening rather than ending their day. You should listen to him, he said quietly to Maria in Spanish. I've seen how people respond to your voice these past months. It's a gift. Maria looked around the coffee shop, at Mr. Lee's kind face, at James's patient expression, at Sophia's hopeful eyes. The walls were covered with local artists' work, dreamers who had taken chances on their talents. But what if I fail? She asked, voicing the fear that lurked beneath all others. What if people don't want to hear these songs? Her hands twisted together in her lap, calloused from the cold and the hard times they'd faced. James shook his head. Music isn't about not failing. It's about being true to your voice. And yours? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Yours is the kind of voice that reminds people what it means to feel deeply. That's rare. That's valuable. Sophia looked up from her notebook. Mama, remember what you always tell me. Even if we have nothing else, we have our songs. She reached over and took her mother's hand, her small fingers intertwining with Maria's larger ones. The evening had grown quiet outside. Through the coffee shop windows, they could see the city lights twinkling like stars. The corner where Maria usually sang was dark now, but somehow it looked different, less like an ending and more like a beginning. Mr. Lee brought over a small box of pastries for tomorrow's breakfast, though they all knew it was really his way of giving them time to think. The familiar scent of cinnamon and warmth filled the air, grounding them in this moment of decision. James watched as Maria's expression shifted, hope and fear dancing across her face. He'd seen that look before, in artists standing at the edge of their dreams, trying to gather the courage to leap. But most of those artists had safety nets. Maria and Sophia had only each other. You don't have to decide right now, he said gently. Take my card. Think about it, talk it over with Sophia. He stood up, gathering his coat. But know this, talent like yours doesn't come along often. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered. As he headed toward the door, Sophia's voice piped up. Mama, can you sing the butterfly song? The one about finding your way home. Her request hung in the air like a prayer. Maria looked at her daughter, then at the business card still lying on the table. Sometimes, she realized, home isn't a place. It's a moment, a chance, a new beginning. Slowly, she began to sing, her voice filling the empty coffee shop with hope. The recording studio felt like another world to Maria. The soft lighting, the soundproof walls, the gleaming equipment, it was all so different from her street corner. 2 weeks had passed since that evening in Mr. Lee's coffee shop, and here she was, standing behind a professional microphone for the first time in her life. Sophia sat in the control room with James, her math notebook open but forgotten as she watched her mother through the glass. The studio's learning center had turned out to be wonderful, but Sophia had begged to watch this first recording session. I want to see Mama shine, she had said that morning. Whenever you're ready, James's voice came through the headphones, just like we practiced. Sing it like you're back on your corner, telling your story to the world. The gentle encouragement in his voice helped calm Maria's nerves. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing La Llorona, the same song that had caught James's attention that fateful morning. But this time, there was no street noise, no passing cars, just her voice filling the space with raw emotion. In the control room, the sound technician sat up straighter, his eyes widening. James smiled, watching the magic happen. He'd seen countless artists perform in this studio, but there was something different about Maria's voice, something that couldn't be taught or manufactured. As she sang, Maria thought about everything that had brought her here. The cold mornings on the street corner, Mr. Lee's quiet kindness, the strangers who had stopped to listen, the business card that had sat on the coffee shop table like a key to another life. Each memory added depth to her voice, making the ancient song feel newly alive. Between songs, James's wife Lisa, the immigration lawyer, stopped by with good news. Their case was progressing well, and she had found a small apartment they could move into temporarily. "It's nothing fancy," she explained, "but it's warm and safe." Sophia hugged her impulsively, then looked embarrassed by her own enthusiasm. The recording session continued into the afternoon. Maria sang songs from her childhood, songs she had taught her students, lullabies she sang to Sophia. Each one carried a piece of their journey. The sound technician worked quietly, occasionally shaking his head in wonder at the purity of her voice. During a break, James showed them something on his phone. A video someone had taken of Maria singing on her corner had gone viral on social media. People were sharing it, asking who she was, telling their own stories of hearing her sing. The comments section was filled with messages of hope and support. People connect with authenticity, James explained, scrolling through the comments. They're tired of perfect, polished performances. They want real stories, real emotions. He showed them a comment from someone who wrote about crying in their car after hearing Maria sing, about how it reminded them of their own mother's voice. Sophia read some of the comments out loud, her English getting stronger each day. "Look, Mama, this person says your voice reminds them of home." Her proud smile lit up the control room. A local news station had picked up the story, wanting to feature Maria in a segment about hidden talents in the city. But James was protective, making sure they understood her story wasn't just about music. It was about resilience, about a mother's love, about keeping hope alive through the darkest times. The internet worked its mysterious ways, and soon a crowdfunding campaign started by one of Maria's regular street corner listeners began gaining traction. People who had been touched by her voice wanted to help. The campaign's description was simple: "Let's help this voice soar." As the afternoon turned to evening, Maria recorded one final song, the butterfly song that Sophia loved so much. This time, when she sang about finding the way home, the words held new meaning. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were starting to live again. In the control room, Sophia had fallen asleep on the small couch, her math notebook still open. James's wife had brought dinner for everyone, and the smell of warm food filled the space. The sound technician was quietly mixing the tracks, occasionally glancing up with an amazed expression. Looking through the glass at her sleeping daughter, Maria felt tears in her eyes. But for the first time in a long while, they weren't tears of worry or fear. They were tears of hope, of gratitude, of possibility. Her voice, the one thing she had never lost, was opening doors she hadn't even known existed. The day ended with James playing back some of the recordings. Maria barely recognized her own voice, so clear and strong without the street noise. "This is just the beginning," James said softly. "Your story, your songs, they're going to touch so many lives." As they prepared to leave for their temporary apartment, Sophia sleepily gathered her things. The studio felt different now, less intimidating. Tomorrow would bring more recording sessions, more paperwork, more steps toward their new life. But for now, Maria just held her daughter close, humming softly, their hearts full of tomorrow's possibilities. 6 months had passed since that first day in the recording studio. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Maria's small music classroom, where a group of children sat in a circle, their eyes wide with wonder as she taught them the butterfly song. The room wasn't fancy, just a converted space in a community center, but to Maria, it was more beautiful than any luxury concert hall. Sophia sat at a desk in the corner, working on her advanced math homework. She'd caught up with her grade level and even moved ahead in some subjects. The stability of their new life had allowed her natural talents to bloom. Every now and then, she would look up and smile, watching her mother do what she loved most, teaching music to children who reminded her of her former students back home. The success of Maria's first album, Songs from the Corner, had surprised everyone except James. The collection of traditional songs, recorded with just her voice and minimal accompaniment, had touched hearts across the country. But Maria had known from the start that she didn't want to be just a performer. She wanted to give back, to teach, to share the gift of music with others who needed it most. "Remember to feel the music in your heart," she told her students, a mix of children from the neighborhood, some from circumstances similar to what she and Sophia had experienced. "These songs are like little birds. They can fly anywhere and bring joy to anyone who listens." The walls of her classroom were covered with colorful drawings of butterflies and musical notes created by her students. Among them hung a framed photo of her old street corner, a reminder of where their journey had begun. Mr. Lee still saved them pastries when they visited his coffee shop, though now Maria could pay for them. After class, as the children filed out with their parents, a small girl lingered behind. "Teacher," she said shyly, "my mama says you used to sing on the streets. Is that true?" Her question held no judgment, only curiosity. Maria knelt down to the child's level. "Yes, it is true. And you know what? Some of the most beautiful moments in my life happened on that corner. When we have music in our hearts, every place can become a stage, and every moment can be beautiful." The success of her album had brought opportunities, but Maria had chosen carefully. She performed at small venues, recorded lullabies for a children's hospital, and focused on building her community music program. The money from her music allowed her and Sophia to live comfortably, but more importantly, it let her help others who were struggling. Every Wednesday, she still went back to her old corner, not to perform, but to connect with those who were where she had once been. She brought food, warm clothes, and most importantly, hope. Sometimes she sang, gathering people in impromptu concerts that reminded everyone that beauty could be found in the most unexpected places. Sophia had started a math tutoring program for younger kids in the community center, charging nothing for her help. "I remember how it feels to need help," she explained simply. Her father would have been proud of how she used her gift for numbers to lift others up. Their small apartment above the community center wasn't luxurious, but it was home. Photos of Roberto shared space with Sophia's academic awards and newspaper clippings about Maria's music. The kitchen always smelled of fresh coffee and sometimes of the Mexican dishes Maria was teaching Sophia to cook, keeping their heritage alive. James still dropped by occasionally, not as a producer but as a friend. He'd watch the children's music classes with a smile, remembering that morning in traffic when he'd first heard Maria's voice. "You know," he said one day, "in 20 years of producing music, this is the first time I've seen success measured not in records sold, but in lives touched." The crowdfunding campaign that had helped them get started had evolved into a foundation, helping other talented individuals who needed a chance to shine. Maria served on its board, her experience giving her unique insight into what people really needed to transform their lives. That evening, as Maria and Sophia walked home from the community center, they passed a street performer singing with a guitar. They stopped to listen, dropped some money in his case, and smiled at each other, remembering. The city hadn't changed. There were still struggles, still people needing help. But they had changed, grown stronger, learned to turn pain into purpose. At home, Sophia worked on her homework while Maria prepared dinner. The Butterfly song played softly from their small radio, not Maria's version, but a cover by a young artist who'd been inspired by her story. "Mama," Sophia said, looking up from her books, "remember when you used to tell me that music builds bridges?" Maria nodded, stirring the soup that reminded her of her grandmother's recipe. "I remember, mi amor." "I think I understand now," Sophia continued. "It's not just about the songs, is it? It's about giving people hope, showing them that things can get better." Through their open window, the sounds of the city drifted in, traffic, voices, music from various sources blending together in the urban symphony they'd come to love. Maria looked at her daughter, now taller and more confident, but still with the same kind heart that had helped them survive their darkest days. "You're right, mi vida," Maria said softly. "Music was our bridge, but love was always our foundation." She turned back to the stove, humming the Butterfly song, her voice joining the city's evening chorus, no longer singing just to survive, but to remind others that even in life's hardest moments, there's always hope for a new beginning.